This episode is brought to you by Lumina Growth Lab. At Lumina, we help professional learning and development companies who are struggling with predictable lead flow, a sniper approach to attracting the ideal clients, and a system that qualifies leads so they can have a smoother sales process, finally have scalability, and ultimately take their business to the next level. Most of the time, our clients come to us frustrated because nothing seems to work outside of word of mouth and referral based lead gen. But with the right strategy and support, they're able to confidently add new channels of lead generation, leading to a packed pipeline that creates sustainable revenue and year-over-year growth for cheaper than ever before because of the use of AI technologies. If that sounds like you or someone you know, connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'd be happy to have a conversation with you about unlocking your business's potential. Now, let's dive into today's episode. Welcome to the Marketing Matrix. I'm your host, Lisanne Murphy, and today I am joined by the one and only one that I know anyway, Josh Bellis. Josh, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Guys, I'm really excited for the conversation that we're about to have. I had the opportunity to meet Josh recently, and I think that I don't know if he's admitted this to himself, but he's stuck with me as a friend because I just really, really like who he is as a human being and his philosophy and the work that he's doing in the world. And so I'm really excited for him to take the microphone soon and share a bit about himself and the philosophies that drive him in his work every day. So before I do that, I want to take a moment to introduce him and just give you a taste of just like how awesome this guy is. Okay. So today's guest is Josh Bellis, a global HR executive, educator, and doctoral researcher who's redefining what it means to lead people in the age of AI. Josh has spent his career at the intersection of technology, culture, and transformation, leading global talent and organizational change initiatives at companies like Fox, NASDAQ, and PTC, while advising others through his work at ChangeForce.ai, a consulting practice centered on change enablement. He also teaches HR technology at Columbia University, serves on the board of the Student Leadership Network, and is finishing his doctorate in business administration at Drexel, studying how organizations can actually adopt AI successfully, not just talk about it. He describes his work as helping companies connect human intelligence with artificial intelligence, or as he puts it, making sure the robots don't forget who they work for. I love it. I'm so excited. And that's like honestly like the best synopsis of like a doctoral study I've ever heard. Cause like normally when you hear people's doctoral synopsis, they're like you're like, So
This was a concern of mine.
yeah, it actually sounds interesting. So again, Josh, welcome. I'm just seriously so stoked that you're here today.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so for people that don't know you, first of all, I mean, I don't know how you have time to do all this. Like, I mean, you're a doctoral student and you have a family and you're working at Change Force. Like, is sleep something that's a priority for you or not really?
No, but it never really has been. So, but
That's
honestly,
awesome.
it all kind of melts together. So it doesn't really feel like work when you really enjoy it. I know that's a very cliche saying, but it at least rings true for me.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And I think that's the goal that we're all striving for is to like find something that it's a lifestyle. It's not a quote unquote job, right? I love that. Okay, so for people that don't know who you are, like how did you become so passionate about people, like people change and change management and AI and how it all fits together? Like where did it start for you? Even if it's like when you were little, like I want to know, like what are the origins of your interest in humans?
The origin story. Okay, well, if you want to go back, we can go back to McDonald's.
Let's do it.
When I was 16 years old working at McDonald's, I just, I really enjoyed working with I met so many different kinds of people there, and I got really interested in just hearing, the managers were always complaining like, "I don't have anyone to work the fry station tonight. What am I gonna do?" And I'm like, "Just train people. Like, like, I'm happy to learn. Like, sign me up, you know?" And so I became a crew trainer and a manager by the time I graduated high school, but I just really enjoyed, like, teaching people and seeing them, so it was like a little thing, you get, like, a little sticker on your badge, like, every time you would learn a new station, and it really became, like, competitive, and it really enjoyed it. But then I kinda got away from it, you know, into college, like, undergrad for political science, and then still somehow a couple years out of school end up like falling into HR after having been hired to like help my employer understand the millennial audience. I was like, well, where are all your interns and like what's happening, and then that kind of got me back into the people space, completely by accident.
Okay, so hold the phone. You were hired to teach about millennial culture.
Yes.
Okay, you gotta dive into that. Like, how
And
the
just to make
heck?
it more interesting, it was at Fox.
Oh my gosh. Okay, now was this like a position that like millennial expert wanted? Like was it a posted
So
position like that?
it wasn't. I was actually working at a higher ed nonprofit, and someone on the board of that nonprofit just liked the direction I had taken. Like it was a nonprofit that supported students who wanted to get into careers in journalism. And I made a ton of changes to the program when I kind of took it over. And that board member was just like talking me up. And I literally got called in by Roger Ailes for a meeting. Like it was literally like something completely unexpected. And yeah, like no interest before that and to like move to New York or like even work at a big company. It just kind of all came together like by accident.
That is like seriously wild. But like, okay, so he basically invents this job for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, what did you do? Like, were you just like, this is social media? Like what like I
No,
this is amazing.
but it was just, there was obviously we were past the .com boom at this point, but it was still very much like figuring out what are we doing with our digital properties, thinking about, okay, well, we have the key audience that we want now, but what's going to happen in 10 years from now, you know? So people were very aware that the millennials were sort of like entering the workforce, and really all the data was just showing it was just completely misaligned with the brand. And so my role was to come in and basically teach the executives about what kind of products would be interesting to millennials, and, you know, and do tests basically on products. So we did launch like a college-based website. We did some different app experiments. We did like a satire newsletter, and I think one of the most shocking things to the executives was like, yeah, nothing can actually have the Fox News logo on it because based on my research, it's yeah, people are just turned off entirely by just the divisiveness of it. Whether they agree or disagree with whatever's happening, it's like it has to be branded something else. And so a lot of what we did was just like branded as a separate brand.
Interesting. So like and was there a particular project that like you were really proud of that like did well?
I, you know, I had projects that did better, but I loved my little newsletter called Copy That. We just had so much fun writing it. It's like the dream of anyone who's like, at all interested in writing and like being in a writer's room and like, and so we just had a lot of fun, like, making these like satire headlines and like taking current events and not making light of them, but like putting it in a way that was like relevant for our target audience. So I just absolutely loved that. The election products that we did on like iPad and Android and all that stuff were certainly more popular, where people were able to go in and like put in like who they thought was going to win, and like it was an interactive, red blue map, and all this stuff was definitely more popular and successful. But yeah, I really enjoyed the satire newsletter.
I love that. Okay, well since you are the spokesperson for millennials, if any listeners have any questions for Josh, then we now have found the king of millennial culture. So
Oh my goodness.
congratulations for that.
Thank you.
I love that. So, did that experience, like, has it influenced? Because now we have, like, Gen Z coming up, and I know, like, one of your colleagues, Lewis, is really passionate about the generation gap as well. Like, is that something that, like, you feel like you're seeing things differently because the next generation is starting to come into the workforce, and it's the same situation over and over again about what is attractive to these people, what motivates this generation, things like that?
Absolutely. It's so interesting because I actually do a training on like generations in the workplace. And I've always been interested in like this generational communication because it's just so different, from traditionalists to like, Gen Z coming in. And we've got like all these generations in the workplace now and all trying to work together for a common cause with completely different value systems and interests. And so I think, millennials are now like, the majority of the workforce. And I think the good thing, like probably any generation, we understand like, the Xers and the baby boomers now because we've been through it long enough. And we also do have an understanding for the next generation. But there's still a lot of stark differences just in, well, I can't really call it work ethic, but basically like that ethos around work, for instance. And I think because millennials had such a hard time of it at the beginning with the financial crisis and all this other stuff, I think, what I'm seeing a lot in the research is Gen Z really enjoys their millennial managers because they are more empathetic and understanding than like other generations. But there still is a lot of disconnect that has to be kind of worked through.
Yeah. One of the things that I think is really interesting, I'd love if you have any thoughts on, is like I feel like every older generation always says that the younger generation doesn't want to work as hard as us, right? Like, I think that, like, the greatest generation said that about the boomers because 'cause they're like, "They didn't have to go to war like us," like, "They just have it easy," and the boomers said that about the millennials, like, "All they wanna do is travel the world," and then now the millennials are like Gen Z, all they wanna do is be on social media and get a quick win. Yet somehow it seems like I mean, capitalism is still alive and healthy, and people are doing jobs. But I'm curious, like, your thoughts on, like I that's a really interesting comment you mentioned in terms of, because, like, as millennials, like, we did grow up kind of with phones, like, not, like, from the time we were infants, but, like, as teenagers, like, we do have a unique connection to the younger generation and to the boomer generation. But I'm curious, like, why do you think it is that, like, every generation looks at the younger generation as like, they just don't work as hard as us.
Uh, Cynicism sets in. Think it's the older generation kind of like backs the next one into a corner a bit, and so there's some wins and some losses in that process, and it is a little bit of just the dust settling. But I think there's some really interesting carryover, at least in this next wave, because like the dot-com boom happened, but then it was a long adoption process, and it was kind of able to be like that because technology was moving at like that kind of a pace where organizations could kind of mess up or like not do it. And I think what we're seeing now is with AI, that option is going away. Like you either have to get on this and do something about it, or you're at risk of actually, going out of business, frankly. And I think the good thing about this two generations is that millennials also really want to move fast. They don't want to sit and talk. They want to see action. They really believe in like learning in the workplace and that employers have some kind of responsibility. And if they don't take that responsibility, they'll just leave. And I think that's very different than some of the previous generations in terms of just thinking about work in general. Right. And so, you know, but I do think it's, there's always this sort of battle that happens as like the next generation really becomes a majority player, that some of the older generation, they have to kind of like go with parts of it. They just, but on the other hand, like you get tired of fighting and you just like give up on the other parts. So I do think we sort of meet in the middle, but I am really curious if that's really what's going to happen right now, because I think the rate of technology and the way that organizations are sort of going to need to adopt it, I don't know that Gen Z is gonna have to give up as much as other
Mm,
generations have had to give up.
interesting, interesting. That's so fascinating. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about, like, because your study right now, like, in your doctoral, is around AI, and AI is just a huge conversation globally right now. I feel like there's so much fear mongering around it though. You know, like, it's
Yes.
like it's gonna take all of our jobs if you don't adopt it. Like, your company's going out of business. Like, and while there might be elements of truth to this, like, I don't know. Like, I would love your perspective, like, since you're studying it, like, how do we approach it with courage and excitement and innovation and curiosity and not like, if I don't do this, I'm gonna cease to exist.
Yeah, it is very Terminator. But yes, so there's been so many sensationalized headlines, and again, it's just like media has always been there and the access to it is just now so much more in your face. You can't really get away from it. And so I think, yeah, like one or two headlines sometimes just reverberates and in society. And so like, yeah, earlier this year it was like all entry level jobs are dead now. And it's like, is it like I don't think that's really the case. Like you can see where a lot of the typical types of work that happen with entry level jobs at some point a majority of that work might be able to have AI involved. But really, if you even think about like since the Industrial Revolution is the same thing, it's the same story. Everyone panics and says, oh my gosh, there's jobs that are going away. But so many more jobs are going to be created because of it. And that is, I think, the part that gets lost in the storyline, right? And so, especially now, I'm a big ChatGPT user. It makes mistakes all the time. I mean, and something as basic yesterday, I was trying to get it to resize a photo, but and the website I was trying to upload it to was like, this isn't the right size. And I'm like, are you sure it's this size? Yes, it's this size. And then literally I ask it again. I'm like, I want you to double check. You're right. Actually, it's not the right size. So it's like, that's a very basic, small example, but like in a big organization, we're trying to understand how these technologies work, how we can use them, what we can do. We're nowhere near the time to completely replace like an entire band of 0 to 5 jobs with AI. But I do think it's worth, companies need to start exploring how AI can be with the human in the loop. How is it going to impact how this sales representative does their job, how this marketing professional. And that's really where our time should be. But people are jumping way beyond that. They're going from like 0 to 60 of like, it's going to take over and we need to start putting agents on org charts. And like, it's like, okay, maybe at some point, we'll get there. It may be faster than we think, but it's not today. We're not ready. And the other thing is what you pointed out earlier is people are afraid and that fear causes pushback. And so even if companies bring in these technologies, employees have a lot of power by still kind of sidelining their process and choosing not to really adopt the technology in the right way. They'll find backdoor ways to kind of use it, but not use it. And so that's really damaging for AI because AI is dependent on this human training and telling it what needs to happen. So if they don't adopt the technology properly, the technology also won't work. So really, it has to get back to we have to find a way to get employees to to build the trust of this technology. And it all circles back to people and how to talk about behavior change and really getting organizations to understand that empathy that of the fear and really like how are we dealing with that in the workplace.
I love that. I had no idea that people were like thinking about like putting AI agents on org charts. That is crazy, but it totally makes sense. It absolutely makes sense. I mean, especially like I mean, if you've got like you've now replaced like your sales setting team with an agent, like that's a part of the process, and like so that needs to be noted. That's so fascinating. Wow. I really love you correlated fear with pushback. I think that's like a really, really important thing. And the recognizing that like AI is only as good as the instructions that we give it, right? And the training that we give it. And so it doesn't what do they elucidate, I think is a word that I hear a lot, right? Is that it doesn't just like fill in the gaps because it's doing its best with whatever instructions it has, but it doesn't have like a if you don't give it the proper knowledge base, and it doesn't have like the context, then it'll just pull from you don't know what. And so I love that. So is AI something that like you're personally like are you truly passionate about how it blends with humans in the workplace? Or like is it just kind of like almost like by necessity, like if I don't figure this out, then I don't know. Like is it something you're
Yeah,
actually
I can
passionate
see out
about?
of a job.
Exactly.
So it is something I really am passionate about because I think, when we talk about the big bad, like, diversity, equity, and inclusion phrase. It is something that when it's done correctly, when the AI is trained correctly, it really is a leveler. And so, it doesn't need to take in things like pedigree, like, if you went to Harvard or a state school, right? It's really looking at what do you know? What skills do you have? So, I've been working with AI since before ChatGPT came to the world. And in recruiting in specific, I've been using these tools and most recently this tool called Eightfold AI. And it's basically a talent intelligence platform is like the category of technology. And basically, it's all built on a neural network AI who looked at half the world's working population and their careers and how they got skills and when. And so now it's looking at people when companies who have this tool, it's looking at you not just by the titles that you have, but the bullet points you put. And so if you're really bad at doing resume writing, like, most people are because that's not their job, this is helping you because it's really understanding, well, you didn't say, as a marketer that you understand channel strategy, but like we're going to make the assumption based on the fact that you were in that role for so long that you do have that skill. And so basically it's now surfacing jobs for people that they never even imagined for themselves because they didn't know that all their skills also equal these other roles and vice versa. And it's also showing people, hey, you have this gap. If you want to become an engineer, you need these 5 skills. And so to me, I think it's also helping humans who are also not good. So managers, for instance, who are not good at coaching and developing their employees, which again, unfortunately, a lot are not. But the reality is we can train and do all this, but a lot of managers just don't really care about that. Like, dare I say that? So, so I think this technology can help by letting employees like take the ownership of that. So that's where I'm passionate about this technology has the ability to surface people to roles that they should be in that normally would get sidelined because they don't have that pedigree. And it can also help people understand what they need to do to get to that next level. So from a talent perspective, this is why I'm interested in this. And then, you know, my research is really focusing on what's missing in the company. So great. They bought this wonderful tool, but it's still not working. Why? And so I am finding that a lot of organizations aren't putting that human piece in from the beginning. They're not enabling employees. They're not doing that change enablement work that has to happen in order for people to want to adopt and use the technology. So it's also not just about going and buying this cool technology. Like it's going to fail if you don't do this other part of the work that also has to be done.
Interesting. Yeah. So there's like a whole like, how do we integrate it into our workforce, not just like sign up for the subscription?
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Okay, so like, and you brought up like change enablement, which is like what the main function of changeforce.ai, where you do your consulting work. So like, what are the organizations that you work with? Are they asking the right questions about AI, or do you sometimes have to like go in and like inform them like what questions they should be asking about AI in order to leverage tools in the change transformations that you do in organizations?
I love the way you asked that because turns out people are not really asking the right questions, I would say overall, right? Because executives as a body, right? I mean, their focus every day is like leading and running an organization and their focus is very much on business as usual and it's really, challenge. This is why executive ed programs exist, right? Because it's like how do we upskill these leaders? And basically you've got boards and CEOs coming to their leadership team and saying, figure this out, implement AI. And so they're just scrambling to do it like as a checklist, but they're missing that education component. And so they're not asking the right questions. And this is why MIT put out the study maybe a month or two ago saying that 95% of organizations are failing at their trials in AI. And so we've developed a certification for leaders to help them just get up to speed on what are the differences between these different tools. Like how should we go? What's a model we should implement to do this experimentation and see if there's success or not? And so, we've talked to clients all the way from people who are just, here's a co-pilot license, have fun. And then they never really check in on what happened, all the way to, okay, we're going to give you a log, an Excel sheet, and we would like for you to track every time you open Copilot to say what it is that you did, what the prompt was, what time it was, how long it took. And it was like, okay, well, you've now put another barrier in front of people to be like, yeah, I'm not doing that.
Yeah,
This is
the time that it saved me is now not.
gone. So it really is, it is a mix, right? And not that everyone is, failing or everyone's not doing it right. We're seeing organizations that have task force and they've got a good governance model for the organization, to get past some of the risk elements of like putting proprietary data in and those kinds of things. But even those organizations are still sort of like waffling on what direction to go in. And it's almost like it feels, I think, to a lot of our customers like it's a bet. We're going to place a bet on this and like cross our fingers and hope that we win. And we're trying to turn it into more of a science. Right? No, there's actually a way to do an experiment to look for certain outcomes and based on those outcomes, make an informed decision about which way to go.
From those that I've spoken to in the organization, you guys are heavily, heavily human centric in terms of helping the leaders understand like what are the human dynamics that are impacting their organization currently and the impacts that those behaviors and attitudes have in the process of change. So I'm curious to know, like, in the work that you guys are doing, like, how much is focused around AI enabling this process versus like humans just being better humans and being better leaders and being better understanders of the generation gap or of the processes needed for scale or whatever. Like, and I don't know if you can be like, I'm sure with every company it's a little bit different. You can't be like it's this percentage or this percentage. But I'd be curious to know your thoughts on like how you guys are leveraging both the
Yeah.
HI and the AI.
Yeah. It's really interesting because the company actually started, our co-founders started building technology products to help companies understand their people better. So, without going into our whole product list, but like one is a sentiment tool. So it connects to Teams and Slack and all these communication channels. And it's trying to understand in real time, like what's happening in the employee population, not as a big brother tool or anything, but just as a way to pull themes out for executives to understand, like, okay, what's really happening in a way that's deeper than just the engagement survey because we know pulse surveys, engagement surveys, they are a must, they are needed, but employees aren't always comfortable saying the truth in those. So you've always got to, kind of look at that as one data point. So they're trying to provide more data points. And another tool is for teams. So, you've got all these amazing assessments out there, but they always like give people a persona, you're an architect or you're a promoter. And so they're trying to get away from that. And they do an assessment that looks at an entire team. And so that is then how those activities are based is based on how well this team works together. It doesn't give people that individual identity that distracts them from the focus. And so, but what they found in implementing these technologies that yes, they're helping, these organizations with these very human problems using AI, but really one of the biggest challenges was getting these tools out into the company. And so that's really how our sort of advisory practice started is like, hey, they need these technologies, but the real problem is these companies can't figure out how to do the change necessary to embrace these kind of technologies. And so now we started all these, different work streams and lines of work around, the company just we acquired two diversity related companies at the end of last year. We acquired an education company because all of these things are intersecting, right? Like if we don't have the right educational mindset, we also can't advise our customers well on how to go about building the right. And that's where I make the difference between change management and change enablement, because change management is like the ecosystem of what needs to happen. Change enablement gets down into the nitty gritty, right? What exactly are we doing for train the trainer? What are we doing for managers? How exactly are we going to make this come to life for our employees. And so it very much is a balance. I mean, I definitely would say if I had to give a percentage, it's a 70% human and 30% AI because it is human. These are all human processes. It's like the introduction of factories, in the Industrial Revolution. The tools need to be understood by the humans in order for the tools to work. And it's the same now, very different in some ways, but also very similar that we need the humans in order to train the tools and in order to fix the tools, in order to figure out like the right way to do this the best way. And so we can't really make this about the technology. It's about
Mm,
the humans.
I love that. I love that. So and then tell me, like, especially for the listeners to get a little bit introduced to Change Force, like what are the types of companies that you guys work with?
We work with companies all from all kinds of I mean, technology, healthcare, we've got automotive, like other manufacturing companies. We work with big Fortune, 50 companies all the way to startups. And another part of our business is all about post-merger acquisition and exit strategy for startups. And so it does kind of run the gamut. We have a big group of our company that's also very like former marketing agency, and so we've got a really heavy agency presence as well. So I know that's not great for maybe the listeners. It's across the board, but it is kind of a really diverse portfolio of customers.
Yeah, well, I think honestly, it's very common in the L&D space to be, to have like industries that like you've penetrated just by the network, but like truly, I mean, like what you do in terms of like the principles and applicability, like it's very industry agnostic,
Yes.
and so
That's one of the reasons why I think I've stuck with the, HR talent theme throughout my career because I've had the opportunity to work in so many different industries because just as you said, it's agnostic sort of to that. Like, yes, you need to learn those things, but it's part of the learning curve. Yeah, learning is learning.
yeah. Well, I love, I mean, going back to the beginning of the conversation, you said, like you fell into HR, like it was like an accident, but I don't know, Josh, like every time I talk to you, it's like, like you bleed HR. Like, I don't think you fell into it. I think you are
I am
HR.
HR.
Yeah. And I wish we don't have as much time to go into this, but one of the things that Josh and I have talked about in a previous conversation is just the power that HR has to actually affect human transformation, and that HR is not just compliance and documentation and offices filled with files on people. But there's a great opportunity. But it's tough. I'm sure you've experienced this. Like it takes a special organization to realize that function of HR. Like a lot of times it's just they're kind of put in the back office along with like hiring, and that's basically hiring and firing, and that's what they do. So
Yes. The HROs got put in the center of the boardroom, and it was a real opportunity to show strategic thought process. And so, I mean, there is the true movement to get HR out of that administrative category. And but yes, my entire career has been about showing how HR actually moves the business forward and is not just there to process applicants and check I-9.
all right, well, Josh, it has been seriously such a joy to have this conversation, and it has been seriously so great having you on the Marketing Matrix today. So thank you so much for sharing your experience and your expertise and your heart and your knowledge. It's really just been so fun. So thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
So for people that want to follow you and learn more about HR or your research or changeforce.ai, like give us the details. Like how do people find you?
So, I mean, old fashioned, if you want to call it old fashioned for millennials, you can go to changeforce.ai and you can see all of our product offerings there. You can reach me on LinkedIn, Joshua Bellis, and I'm also on Substack with some of my thoughts at the Human Playbook.
That's awesome. I love it. I love it. Okay, we're gonna drop the links to your handle and your Substack and to Changeforce as well, so people can get in touch if they are wanting to know more. Which if you don't, guys, then come on. Like, let's go. But Josh, again, thank you so much for being such a rich part of the conversation that we're putting together on the marketing matrix.
Of course, thank you.
All right, guys. So wherever you're listening from, whether it's your kitchen, your car, or Costco, we're grateful for your time. We know that your time is valuable. So for you to choose to spend a moment with us means the world. Until next time on the Marketing Matrix.